Joining right now. Yeah, we're getting some good members joining now. So, Jake, did you just want to do an introduction for this event and explain why this is kind of a hybrid option and that should allow anyone else a few seconds to log on?
Yeah, so this is kind of our second Pilar Thomas show. As you all know, Pilar is really engaged with a lot of what's happening in DC at the federal level, both from a policy standpoint, but also, funding opportunities. And that's really why we've set up the kind of this recurring meeting, is to give Pilar the opportunity to kind of give the lay of the land in terms of where we should be paying attention, what's out there. But I also definitely want to provide the opportunity for tribes to ask those questions that you have and get into the weeds on some of this stuff. And, I know each of you are probably in different stages of tapping into some of this. As things come up, as you run into roadblocks or have questions, complications, email them my way. We'll loop in Pilar, we'll loop in everyone. We want to get those kind of questions to the agenda for these recurring discussions. So I guess another quick kind of administrative update. As you all know, our DOE grant ended last month. Boo-hoo, cry, cry, cry. We have no budget now. So we've switched to this kind of what I'm calling the lean model, which is we still want to meet monthly. And I think these topic specific discussions will glue that together. But in terms of our quote unquote board meetings where we need quorum, we need to make decisions as an organization, that has shifted to quarterly. So our next official board meeting is December. But as you have all seen, we have a recurring monthly meeting where, again, we want to keep the network strong, keep these topic specific discussions going. And after Pilar has to hop off today, I'll talk about some funding opportunities that are looking quite optimistic for MTerra going forward. So with that, Pilar, I will pass it to you. You can share your screen if you want. And for others, please stay engaged and please feel free to ask questions throughout this. We want this to be a back and forth discussion as things come up. All you, Pilar.
All right, sounds good. Well, what I thought I would do is lead with the lead, which is the Inflation Reduction Act. And I don't know, oh shoot, hold on, let me get this right. I don't know how many folks, I did a webinar a few weeks ago, client slash kind of law firm webinar on this. And so what I thought I would do is just provide you with kind of a quick summary of the IRA. I will share these slides with you. I will also update you on kind of what's going on with the IRA right now. It was unfortunately not a major topic of discussion at the DOE summit last week. There was a lot of discussion around the bipartisan infrastructure law. There was a lot of, I don't know if Jake will be doing a summary of the summit for you guys. I didn't see very many folks from MTerra there. I know Ho Chunk was there. I see George is on. I think White Earth was there. Was White Earth part of MTerra? So should memorize your members. Yeah. I know Mille Lacs was there as well. So there were only about 60 tribal leaders. I don't know how many tribes were actually there, but there were only about 60 tribal leaders out of the 574. So it was pretty sparsely populated, and again, a heavy emphasis on the bipartisan infrastructure law. I will have an energy update coming out this week, probably later today, in fact. So I know I've provided you guys with kind of my monthly kind of here's where things are on the energy side. And I do need to update that because there have been some shifting timelines. There's some new updated timelines. So let me address that real quick and you'll get again this updated matrix with kind of a summary of things. One, as you may know, the grid resiliency, which is the formula grant. There's like 3 or 4 grid resiliency programs. One of them was a formula grant for states and tribes. Every tribe got an allocation. And I think I covered that the last time and it was in my alert. They extended that deadline from September 30th to March 31st. One question for Mterra is whether you want to engage DOE's Grid Deployment Office directly on how they can provide you with technical assistance to access your funding. I had a very long conversation with the grid deployment people in DC around the problem this program creates for tribes, not just in terms of accessing the funding and the application process that we have to go through, but the way the program is structured, and it's statutory program, nothing we can do about what Congress said, but grid deployment is interested in trying to figure out how to make sure tribes get access to this funding. So we have an opportunity to engage Grid Deployment Office directly on how to help the Mterra tribes access this funding. And they're looking at a couple of different models. One model for tribes that are in co-op territories, where, you know, it's not going to be necessarily quite so easy to figure out how to work with your co-op. Maybe you have a good relationship with your co-op, maybe you don't. But there is an opportunity for them to kind of help us manage either programs, what we can do, provide technical assistance to us. And so if there is an interest, you know, I'd encourage maybe some internal discussion with you guys and let me know. And I'm happy to facilitate a direct conversation with the Grid Deployment Office around how to help you access that grid resiliency money. So that's kind of something that's kind of coming out of these discussions. Again, move to the end of March. They also have a request for interest open on other grid resiliency programs that they have. And they have put out their, they're in a comment period on transmission. And I know that this is one area you guys have looked at very closely, it being mostly in MISO, how you access transmission, what your opportunities are for transmission development, and the transmission office, which is part of the Grid Deployment Office, has also expressed interest in engaging directly with tribes around transmission. So grid resiliency is kind of your distribution grid, and then transmission, the bigger grid issues. So if there is interest in Mterra and the Mterra members around, again, engaging with the Grid Deployment Office directly, let me know and I can help facilitate some conversations with them, maybe have them come on at one of these monthly calls, give them a little bit of time, come on and tell you what they're doing. You can hear directly from them. So if there's interest, let me know and we can go ahead and set that up.
So Pilar?
Randy's hand is raised. Yes.
Yeah, so if I'm not mistaken, and Charlie can back me up on this possibly, this is the first one you talked about was the one that they screwed up the Minnesota Chippewa tribe on, and they gave all the money to Minnesota Chippewa tribe, and it's like this dinky pot of money.
Yeah.
That's something we want to discuss with them, and I brought it up to the gentleman from DOE, the tribal liaison for this area to work on.
Okay.
But that's something that I think needs to be really addressed because it's really not helping us. And why even engage in the program for a few piddly $1,000s?
Yeah, and one of the things that they have pointed out is, at least with the grid resiliency, this is a 5-year program. They will reevaluate the formula. They said, and they reemphasize this at the summit. So I think the problem, the challenge is they're kind of stuck right now with what they've done. And that's fine, because what they will do is roll over the money. So if you don't go out and apply for the money in the first year, they will roll that money over into the second year. And then they're going to reevaluate their formula. And they've asked for input again. So maybe this is where we can, again, directly engage the grid office, the Grid Deployment Office, who's reached out to me directly, primarily because I know their director. I worked with her when I was at DOE, and I've been jawboning her for months about this program. So she finally sent her people to me and said, work with Pilar and figure this out. So I think we have an opportunity, if we want to bring them here to discuss your concerns, your issues, get them here in front of you. They have expressed, again, a very direct interest in working more directly with tribes. Everybody's a little bit different around the country.
Right.
They've got issues all over the place. So maybe that's the next step, is we get them in front of you and we talk through some of your comments. They will reopen the comment period for their next review. As I said, they're going to go and look at this stuff again. So this is another area where, maybe putting together either individual tribal client comments or MTERA comments to them, but we certainly want to have some informal discussion as well.
Well, we only have 45 minutes left till you have
Okay.
a hard stop. So maybe we should get into this. But yes, I saw from some of the comments too, we want to have that discussion. So please bring that forward and we'll work with MTERA to get engaged with them.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Thanks,
All right, let me
Pilar.
just quickly go through the IRA. I don't know how many folks have had an opportunity yet to read about what's going on here. I don't know how many folks were on the webinar that I did, but I'm going to kind of flip through these slides again. I'll send you guys will get a copy of this so you have it. Let me just go straight to the IRA, the 3 key areas that the MTERA tribes should be looking at very intently with respect to energy. 1 is the tribal specific programs. 2 are the tax benefits, which are a combination of credits and deductions. And then the 3 are what I call the environmental programs, the EPA programs. And Brandy, this is where maybe your 2 hats will help when you're working on Clean Air Act, because there's billions of dollars now under Clean Air Act programs that are relevant to energy development. So quickly, the tribal specific programs, two agencies, basically, DOE, DOI. On the DOE side, the loan guarantee program, they increased the loan authority to 20 billion. They've increased the guarantee percentage from 90 to 100%. Tribes can apply for direct loans from the loan guarantee program, but it's a limited time period. That's not permanent authority. Hopefully they'll make that permanent. In addition, DOE will be running the high efficiency electric home rebate program. There is a $225 million set aside for tribes in that program. I'll talk about that more in a minute, but remember number 1, the DOE is going to run that program. Some little birds at DOE told me they're trying to figure out who in DOE will run that program. So whoever they decide to do it, they will be hopefully going out for comments and consultation. So this is area number 1 to start thinking about potential comments. DOI got 220 million for climate resiliency. This is in their typical, their standing climate resiliency program. And they got another 145 million to electrify homes. Three basic types of programs or projects. 1 is to electrify unelectrified tribal homes. 2nd is to transition electrified tribal homes to zero emission energy systems. And then the 3rd is to do home repairs or retrofitting necessary to install zero emission energy systems. So what does that all mean? Things like, of course, rooftop solar, geothermal heat pumps, or other types of electrification, getting rid of, for example, natural gas water heaters, natural gas heat, propane, wood, and electrifying. That's the same going to be with the home electrification rebates. This 145 million is intended, when you read the statute, to kind of run through the 638 process. So it says the money basically can be provided to tribes under their 638 contracts or compacts. One-time distribution, doesn't go into your base. So it's intended to be easy to do, unlike the DOE program. So that's kind of on the tribal specific side, but the real money is in our new tax benefits. So I'll cover pretty quickly, although I have a lot of detail in the slides. I'll cover these quickly. So number 1, direct pay for tribal governments. We will be entitled to a payment equal to the amount of the tax credit. They've changed the investment tax credit. They've changed the production tax credit. We have new tax credits for EV vehicles and charging stations and other technologies. And there are new residential tax credits. Of course, the tribe is not eligible for the residential, but your tribal members who own their homes would be eligible for the residential tax credits. What does direct pay mean? First of all, it's for tribal governments, effective for projects that begin after January 1st of next year. So if you're doing a project now or want to do a project now, hold on, wait till January to start it. So it's eligible for direct pay. There's a long list of clean energy technologies. I'll go through that in just a minute as well. And payment from Treasury equal to the tax credit. I have some examples in a minute to show you how it works. The investment tax credit. So this is a one-time payment based on the value of your project or the cost basis of a project. Now, normally taxable entities would be eligible for the tax credit, not tribes. We don't pay taxes. Not tribal enterprises. We don't pay taxes. But the direct pay now will entitle us to a payment equal to whatever this tax credit is. So what do we have? We have the investment tax credits extended till 2025. There will be a new clean electricity investment tax credit that's technology neutral that will go into effect in 2026 through 2033. So 10 years from now. It is the tax credits extended to geothermal heat pumps and standalone storage. If you do a solar project or wind project less than 5 megawatts, you also get interconnection costs. Huge issue for those tribes that have been looking at rooftop solar, looking at community scale solar, wind, or beginning to look at geothermal. Or if you just wanted to do standalone batteries as backup power, now you can get tax credits for those batteries as backup power. The tax credit, there's a bunch of bonus credits. You have to pay prevailing market wage and have an apprenticeship requirement in order to get 30% tax credit. It's not required if it's less than 1 megawatt. So if you do a 500 kilowatt solar system across all your homes or many of your homes or on your government building, you don't need to meet the prevailing market wage requirement. You will get a 30% tax credit automatically if it's less than 1 megawatt. Domestic content, another 10%, again, not required if less than 1 megawatt. So if you did a 1 megawatt project, you'd get 40% tax credit right off the base, right off the bat. If you're in an energy community, and that means a community that has brownfield sites where you have high areas of unemployment related to coal, oil, or natural gas, or if you're in a census tract that has a coal mine or is adjacent to a coal mine that has closed. So not every tribe is going to be an energy community. Some will, but that's how the tax credit's going to work. 30 plus 10 plus 10. So that's right here, 50% tax credit. In addition, there are environmental justice credits. These are for projects 5 megawatts or less. It's the investment tax credit only. It's solar and wind only. The Secretary of Treasury will allocate these kind of credits to projects and you get additional plus ups. So 10% more if it's located on Indian lands and 20% more if it's going to benefit tribal housing. Again, includes interconnection costs. If you do a microgrid, it includes your controller, it includes storage. So the end result is a rooftop community solar, community wind, or microgrid project that's 5 megawatts or less. They get the environmental justice credits, can receive up to an 80% tax credit. 30, 10, 10, 10, 20. They're all additive. So if you're looking at doing these projects, I encourage you to start figuring out how much tax credit you're eligible for, because then you go get direct pay. You go get direct pay. That means that, let's say you had a 5 megawatt solar project that cost you $10 million and it's 30 plus 10 plus 10 plus 20. Let's say you're not an energy community, but you're on Indian lands. It's going to benefit your housing, and you got prevailing market wage and domestic content. So that's a 70%, right? 30, 10, 50, 60, 70, right? That's a 70% tax credit on a $10 million project. That means Uncle Sam, the Treasury Department, will write you a check for $7 million. You spend 10, Uncle Sam writes you a check for 7. So that $10 million project ends up only costing you $3 million. Basically how it works for everybody else today, but now it works for tribes as well. This also applies a production tax credit. I won't go into a lot of detail here because usually the PTC is taken by really big utility scale projects. So, so you're not likely to see a benefit on the production tax credit. I'm happy to answer any questions about that later. Clean vehicles, electric vehicles, you have new vehicle tax credits, you have used vehicle tax credits, and now you have commercial vehicle tax credits. So on the new and used, there are for residential income limits, price limits. For tribes, the commercial vehicle tax credit, you get direct pay for. So if you get a commercial vehicle, call it a school bus, and you're going to get up to 30% tax credit if it's purely electric, or 15% of the cost if it's not purely electric, if it's hybrid, for example, or a CNG. If it's more than 14,000 pounds, you'll get a $40,000 check from Uncle Sam to pay for that school bus. If it's less than 14,000 pounds, you'll get a $7,500 check from Uncle Sam to pay for that car. So if you got to replace your work trucks, for example, it's a commercial vehicle, you go out and buy a bunch of Ford F-150s, you're going to get $7,500 from Uncle Sam as the tribe through direct pay. In addition, we have these other clean technologies, alternative fuel refueling, EV charging stations. You will get a 30% tax credit for the EV charging station up to $100,000 per charging station. Again, direct pay. So if you want to build out EV charging stations and you don't want to wait for the grant program from Department of Transportation, because it's a competitive grant program, then you can build them and go ask Uncle Sam for your direct pay check equal to your tax credit. If you're interested in clean hydrogen, carbon oxide sequestration, or advanced manufacturing, various tax credits, again, all eligible for direct pay. So if you want to start a solar manufacturing business, you'll get a tax credit to do that. It's pretty massive, and Uncle Sam will write you a check to start that manufacturing company. So let me give some quick examples on direct pay. You do a community solar project for tribal housing, less than 5 megawatts. So let's call that a $12 million project because it's solar plus storage plus interconnection. You could get up to an 80% tax credit if you have prevailing market wage, domestic content, if you're an energy community on Indian land and Indian housing. So you would, after this project goes into production, get a $9.6 million check from Uncle Sam for that $12 million project. Now, everywhere, right? So what does this mean? For me, this means I don't need the Office of Indian Energy's grant program anymore, right? That's a 150-page application with a 50% cost share. And in the old days, 50% was way better than the tax credit amount. But if I can get a 70 or 80% tax credit from Uncle Sam, and all I have to do is build it. Do I have to come up with the money first? Yes. But I got to come up with the money anyway to build the thing from DOE because it's a reimbursement award from them. So if I can come up with the money, if I can come up with $12 million and I can build this project, and Uncle Sam's going to write me a check when it's in operation, and I fill out a one-page document to get my $9.6 million, then now I'm actually going to be in a better position through the direct pay than I might be in grants. Now, it's not always going to be true. Maybe smaller grants where, you know, if they drop the cost share and they give you 90% of the money that you need for a smaller grant. But remember, their grants are limited. Everybody's grants are limited. As you can see, there's no limitation here. If you did a microgrid project for your government campus, again, less than 5 megawatts, let's call that a $35 million project. That's about the cost of a full-blown microgrid, solar storage interconnection, and the microgrid controller. You would get, in this example, if it's for the tribal government campus, up to a 60% tax credit. You don't get the other 20 because it's not housing. So that's a $21 million payment from Uncle Sam. If you tried to apply to DOE Office of Indian Energy through their grant program, you'd only get $2 million from them for your $35 million project. So it may be well worth it to start to evaluate your other options for building projects and paying for projects and using direct pay to do that. Because you're going to have to come up with the remaining, $33 million anyway, even if you went to the Office of Indian Energy. There's a question around cost share. People raise the issue of cost share. Once you get over a $5 million project, cost share is not a problem, right? They only give you $2 million max. So even if there was no cost share, if you have a $5 million project, you're still having to pay for the rest of it. So these bigger projects, the community scale projects, the microgrid projects, now start to get more economically viable for tribes because of direct pay. Do you still have to pay for the difference between 35 and 21? Yes, but you get a $35 million project and you're only going to pay $14 million for it. So those are some of the key trade-offs to start thinking about. You even can use direct pay for utility scale. And some tribes have been looking, I don't know if the Mtera tribes have been looking at big utility scale. I know your relatives over in the Great Plains, the Ocheti Sakowin, have been looking at their 2 gigawatt wind project. If they did something like that, they could now use direct pay or through either ITC or PTC to pay for that. So if you want to do a 250 megawatt solar project, now no, there is no geographic limitation here. So even if you can't do a 250 megawatt solar project on your own land, you could have one on somebody else's land. The 5 megawatts or less, that plus up for Indian land is only for 5 megawatts or less. But you could, in effect, do a solar project right next door to the, what's the big Sherco? Is that the big coal plant that's being shut down by Excel? Yep. And do a big solar project there. The tribe
already is a big solar project there.
You can do a big solar project by Sherco, right?
There already is a big solar project there.
Well, listen, I know, but that was a 2 gigawatt coal-fired power plant, and it's only a 200 megawatt solar project. They're going to need to do more. They're going to need to do more. And now tribes are now sitting in a position where you could go to Excel and say, yeah, we can do a 250 megawatt solar project for you. Direct pay would get you, if you had a 50% tax credit, again, prevailing market wage, domestic content, energy community, 50% tax credit. The tribe would get a $250 million payment if that's a $500 million project. So direct pay now opens the door for us from very small projects to the largest projects. There's no limitation right now on direct pay for tribes. So we have a huge additional economic development opportunity available to us as well. All right, let me keep moving, and I'm happy to answer questions as we go along or towards the end. Commercial energy efficiency. I don't know how many tribes are aware that you could actually now, in effect, sell the tax deduction that you would get for commercial energy efficiency. The federal government and state governments do this all the time when they have energy service companies come in and do big energy efficiency retrofits, either deep retrofits or even not even deep retrofits on government buildings. They're able to take a tax deduction and transfer that to the people who do the work. And in return, you get a reduced cost to do the energy efficiency. I don't know how much, whether folks have looked at this. This might be an area to try and get some technical assistance from DOE on to really understand where the benefit here is. And FEMP, Federal Energy Management Program, which knows these kind of benefits like the back of their hand, because they do these benefits for the federal government, might be a good source. So if you're looking at doing energy efficiency of your government facilities or your casino, then this is a benefit that you can transfer to the people who do the work, and in return they should give you a reduction in cost. Maybe not a dollar for dollar, but should be one way to help pay for energy efficiency upgrades in your government facilities or in your enterprise and or gaming facilities. On the residential side, again, I won't go into a lot of detail. There's two big types of benefits now for your tribal members who own their own homes. Tax credits, and both for energy efficiency and for clean energy generation, i.e. rooftop solar or small wind. There's been an increase in the tax credits. If you're doing, if you do heat pumps, you get even more money, tax credit on the energy generation. So wind, solar, they've expanded it to storage. So if you have tribal members who want to do solar plus storage or want to put in geothermal heat pumps to reduce cost, they will get a 30% tax credit for that. So back up to 30%. Again, they added storage and the energy efficiency. That amount has also been increased. There used to be a lifetime limit on energy efficiency tax credits. That's been removed. So if you have tribal members who are interested in getting their houses fixed up, then this is one way that they can pay for it. The rebate program, this is some more detail for the tribe. So again, this is going to be run by DOE. You're going to have to apply to the secretary. The statute requires you to provide a plan. We've got to see what DOE says as the application process is. No idea how they're going to allocate money. So I would start getting ready for comments. Is it, should not be by population, right? Because this is a home rebate plan. You're going to be paid by house. So one, key idea in the allocation has got to be how many houses need electrification. Should we limit them to tribal owned housing? So your tribal housing authorities. Or should we include tribal member owned housing? And the reason why I put this next to the energy efficiency, if you're a tribal member who owns their own home, you're probably paying taxes. And then, so you're going to be eligible for these tax credits. The rebates, first of all, are low to moderate income limited. So, if you make enough money to pay taxes, then you're going to probably qualify for the tax credits. If you don't make enough money to pay taxes, then the rebate program. So these two programs work together. So this is something to start thinking about. What do we tell DOE we want to do? You're going to get up to $14,000 per project, per house that you can use. $8,000 for heat pumps. There's a limit per type of technology that I have listed here. It does include upgraded electrical wiring. So if you're going to electrify somebody's house and pull out natural gas and pull out wood stoves and pull out propane, and you got to put in new wiring and upgrade their breaker box and all that stuff, there's money in this bucket to do that. There is a limitation. If your tribal member earns between 80 and 150% of area median income, then they only get half this rebate. If they earn less than 80% of area median income, they get 100% of the rebate. So another key question: define area median income. Tribes had a issue with this term in the CARES Act and the ARPA, where many of the programs, especially the housing programs, were limited based on area median income, just like this one is. So another potential comment: the area median income should be defined by reservation, not across the area writ large. So for those tribes that are closer to urban environments where your area median income could be very high, but your tribal median income is very low, I think this should be a comment area for DOE. Use our median income for our reservation and don't count Minneapolis or don't count Duluth or don't count St. Cloud or, you know, area where the income could be substantially higher than your reservation income. Okay, let me pause there real quick before I move on to the environmental programs and see if there are any questions on the pure tax credit, rebates, tax benefits.
I had a couple, Pilar, as if we use federal money to put in solar and EV chargers, can we still get the tax credits?
So great question. And this is Treasury, and I have a note on my last slide. Treasury has put out their notices for comment for these tax credits. This is an area of comment I recommend. How should Treasury treat funding where maybe a tribe or anybody else for that matter also got a grant? So in the past, what Treasury has done and you see this, you don't see this directly in grant language. Every grant's going to be a little bit different. In fact, somebody pointed out the other day that, you know, the Office of Indian Energy's grant program treats other grants as revenue to the project instead of like as your cost share. I don't understand this, but having said that, Treasury has, for example, said, if you use tax exempt bonds to build a solar project, and that solar project then takes tax credits, then the bonded, the tax exempt bond funded amount comes out of the cost. So in my example, let me go back to these examples and let's kind of talk through these. I don't know if this is true. We need to find out from Treasury. Let's say on this community solar project for tribal housing, it's a $12 million project. And let's say you got a $2 million grant. So you decided to go apply to Indian Energy anyway, and you got a $2 million grant from them. What would typically happen is that $2 million would be subtracted from the 12, and you would only get your tax credit on the $10 million.
Okay.
Instead of on the full 12.
Okay.
So that's what they would typically do is IRS would reduce the cost basis by the amount of the grant.
So
Now,
if the grant paid for the full thing, then you wouldn't get any of the rebates.
correct.
Okay. What about if it's a 638 BIA grant?
Well, their money doesn't count as federal money.
Right.
So again, another area for comment.
Okay.
What if we use our NAHASDA money, which also is not federal money for purposes of match? So
Correct.
let's say your tribal housing, let's say you got a $2 million grant from NAHASDA, ICDBG. Does that reduce the cost? The cost basis that the tax credit would be assessed against. So we need to ask Treasury those questions in our comment letters to them on that they've put out, and we've got comments are due November 4th. So that'll be a to-do. That's on our to-do list now. Draft comment letters to Treasury in these, because this is a very, I remember Jake Ashley sent me this question last month. And so that my answer hasn't changed yet, which is one, we don't really know until we hear directly from Treasury, but the typical approach has been take the cost, reduce it by the grant amount, and then you get the tax benefit against the remainder. And in some circumstances, it may be beneficial to go get the grant. You'll still come out ahead. In other circumstances, it may not be. You'll actually be worse off. So, and I think the larger projects, you're likely to be worse off if you try and go get a grant than the smaller projects.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So just process, Pilar, the comments are due early November.
Yeah.
When do some of these answers come out?
After
Because,
they
you know,
respond, after they get everybody's comments, and they'll come out with a revenue ruling. So the notices are up. There's 7 notices. The ones most important to tribes, I think 5 of the notices, one's on direct pay, one's on the clean energy tax credits, one's on electric vehicles. One is on the residential tax credits. One is on, where's my
Okay.
list? So some of them are not, oh, and one is on monetization of tax credits, which we're not eligible for. So I've got the list, but I think clearly the direct pay for us, maybe the residential tax credits, if you guys care about that for your tribal members. But the other is energy efficiency, commercial energy efficiency, which we should, if we're interested in that new benefit for us, we would comment on. But yeah, November 4th is the due date.
and in your experience, is it always better to comment so that you can get clear resolution versus trying to deal with gray area? Yeah, like,
It's always
Yes.
better to comment. First,
Yeah.
I would always comment, always comment, always comment. That's always my number one rule, always my number one recommendation. They may not accept your comments. They may not address them. They may do the exact opposite of what you ask them to do. But you know what? If you don't comment, they're not going to
there's risk and uncertainty. Yeah, because my other thing I get excited about here are these interconnection costs. And that to me has a lot of gray area, because like you could be interconnecting to a high voltage line and just put, you know, a megawatt of solar or a megawatt hour of battery just to say it's a solar or battery project, when 90% of the cost is the substation. And like, is that an area where it's beneficial to comment to resolve that versus just saying, hey, this is a solar project? Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, it seems like gray area might actually help with that versus them saying no to it when you submit the question.
Yeah, no, there's, you know, the rule, and this is something that tribes, I mean, my number 2 recommendation is, if you want to take advantage of these tax credits, hire a tax credit lawyer. I know enough to be dangerous, but I would not rely on my legal advice around how these tax credits are actually going to work. I would hire a tax credit lawyer. Here's why. The general rule of the IRS is tax law is interpreted narrowly. When tribes have been sued or have sued under tax, you know, potential taxes, there's a big Supreme Court case where the Cherokees sued the tax commissioner of the IRS over some excise taxes and said, you can't impose these excise taxes on us. And the commissioner said, yeah, no, the law says we can. And in some cases, the law is silent. So the general interpretation rule of tax code is it's narrowly interpreted. The Supreme Court then went on to say in this case, and we will not apply the canons of Indian canons of construction, which means we won't give the tribes the benefit of the doubt. So I would not, there is no gray area in tax law, in other words. If you want to be sure, one, I would comment, here's what we want to see. On interconnection costs, those comments, for example, should include that, you know, substation upgrades are what, you know, because they don't define interconnection costs.
Exactly.
So we should define it for them. And then we see what they say in the definition when they issue their revenue ruling. And then if we're still not sure, then we do what Forest County did a decade ago, and we go get a private letter ruling that you can then rely on. So if you have a big enough project where that tax credit is sizable enough, then you might want to spend some money going to get a private letter ruling from the IRS that says, yes, this project will qualify for this tax credit. I would not assume that if it's gray, I would not assume that it qualifies. Because it's written all in this law, but it's tax law anyway. If you actually didn't qualify for the tax credit, if that project actually didn't meet the criteria, or the tax credit amount was too high that you claimed, they will come and get it from you. And so if you've got a $40 million project and you're relying on a 50% tax credit, and you get it wrong, they'll come and get it. So the risk is too high, especially the bigger projects, for there to be gray area. But again, if you're going to do tax credit work, I strongly recommend getting a tax credit attorney to help you do that work, because the renewable energy tax credits are unique. And I would certainly get a tax credit advisor to help you figure out the math and how this is going to work. And so, especially if you're going to do these bigger projects where you're talking about real money. Okay, any other questions on the tax credits?
Sarah Smith had a quick question.
yeah.
Is residential also the January 1st, 2023 construction start date threshold? Do you know? Does that apply across the board?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, environmental programs. So these are the couple of programs I have listed here are EPA Clean Air Act programs. So the first is this Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, $27 billion going to the EPA to create. The Clean Air Act has been amended to include this program, gives the EPA authority to make grants to states, tribes, nonprofits to invest in and deploy low zero emission technologies. They've only got a year and a half to do it. I'm sorry, 2 years. So it's broken up into 3 pots, $7 billion in competitive grants to states and tribes only, for states and tribes to provide financial or technical assistance to do projects. EPA has 180 days to roll out this program. There are a handful of low-income community organizations who have submitted a comment letter to the EPA about this $7 billion competitive grant program, emphasizing to EPA that this money needs to be spent in disadvantaged, low-income, and tribal communities. If MTERRA is interested, I'm happy to send that letter to you. And if MTERRA is interested in kind of joining, then I would recommend an MTERRA comment letter to EPA regarding this Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund and the emphasis on these monies being deployed, again, in disadvantaged, low-income, and tribal communities. There's also $12 billion to lending institutions. I've encouraged the Native CDFI network to submit a comment letter saying CDFIs should be able to participate in this $12 billion. EPA should be sending money to your CDFIs to lend money to you or to projects to do these projects. And then there's an $8 billion in competitive grants to nonprofits. That might be you guys, MTERRA, who can go in and work with tribes around deploying competitive low zero emission technologies across your tribal member land. So EPA has not put out anything yet with respect to how they're going to roll this out, but they have 180 days to do it. So in other words, in this program, there's a little bit for everybody here, the tribes themselves, your CDFIs, and MTERRA itself to join in this effort.
Is it realistic to get a tribal earmark out of this?
No. These are all, the statute makes these all competitive grants.
Gotcha. This is a shit ton of money.
Yeah. There's more. So there's another 12 billion, the climate pollution reduction grant, 9 billion. This is for planning and implementation to achieve or facilitate greenhouse gas emission reduction. Again, a lot of clean energy technology. This is also a competitive grant program that tribes can access. And then this environmental and climate justice block grant, $3 billion. These are supposed to be community-led partnerships with tribes and nonprofits. Again, maybe something for Amterra to think about, where you're focused on climate resiliency, low emission resiliency technologies, and education. And this too will be a competitive grant program.
Does this have to be deployed or appropriated by 2024? That's just so much money over.
This is available until 2024.
Available until 2024.
Yeah, so EPA's got to get $27 billion out in 2 years.
Well, we can help them.
Well, hopefully you can. All right, so that's kind of the big environmental programs. I didn't put in here, USDA got $2 billion for REAP. I don't know if any of the Amterra tribes have applied for the REAP program, the Rural Energy for America program. Tribes themselves aren't eligible for the grants, the deployment grants there, but tribal enterprises are. So I don't know if anybody's actually tried to access that, but they got a plus up. You know, typically they're funded at about $100,000. I think in fiscal year 2019, they got like 100 grand, and then they started getting more money. 21, they got 100 million. In 22, they got 250 million, and now they got 2 billion in the IRA. So I didn't add this here, but happy to provide any other info. This is a list of resources I encourage you to look at. Here's the DOE and IRS, literally the day that the president signed this law, they put out a list of the eligible electric vehicles for the tax credit. Their Harvard Energy Law put together a really nice environmental justice matrix of the IRA environmental justice provisions. So I encourage you to take a look at that. It's about 20 pages long. So there's way more stuff in here. So broader than kind of energy. There's also a nice IRA calculator for your residential tax credits and rebates matrix. You can encourage your tribal members to go into this calculator. They put in their zip code, they put in their income, and then they can select whatever they want to do, and it'll tell them how much money they're entitled to. And then finally, Solar Energy Industries put together a nice summary for solar, storage, and manufacturing. So no wind, but solar, and it's a great little set of tables and a lot more detail. All right, so quickly, next steps. Again, the IRS has issued 7 notices to implement the 3 that I'm focused on: direct pay, prevailing market wage, and clean energy technology credits. They haven't put out a notice on the allocation of the environmental justice credits, but they have 180 days from January 1st to do that. So we're not likely to see that till next year. DOE will implement the residential rebate program, and EPA has 180 days to implement the greenhouse gas reduction fund. So our key, start pulling together comments, posing some questions for us to think about. First of all, IRS, because it's first and foremost, the direct pay says tribes. It's not, doesn't define us. So does that include tribal enterprises, agencies, instrumentalities, and subdivisions? Does it include our utilities? Does it include our Section 17s? So an area of comment around what does the term tribe mean for purposes of direct pay? We'll wait and see if the secretary puts out the notice for the allocation of justice credits, but clearly how is she going to allocate those? How do we make sure tribal projects are selected? What's that going to be? Can we use our own prevailing market wage? So much like the tribal area median income, we don't want to use Phoenix or Minneapolis. Same with prevailing market wage. We don't want to get roped into, and especially those tribes that are in, Minnesota's got a very high union labor market. So those wages are very high, relatively speaking. So I think when on the notice for prevailing market wage, promoting tribal prevailing market wage. And then finally, can we leverage partnerships, grant funding, and federal loans with our tax credits? So the question raised earlier about grant funding, other partnerships. You know, if I want to do a 250 megawatt solar project and I got to come up with $500 million, I may, as a tribe, not be able to do that, but I might want to partner with somebody who can do that. And so if we can go in 50-50, we get half the tax credit, they get the other half. Can we do that? And it's very unclear whether tribes will be able to partner with taxable entities and use direct pay. So these are just some initial questions. I know there are a lot more. I would suggest start thinking about that, pulling them together and addressing them in potential comments. On the DOE side, again, who's going to allocate? How are they going to determine it? Can tribal housing authorities directly access the rebate funding? So the tribal housing authorities can use this rebate for upgrading tribal owned homes. Again, it just says tribes. Doesn't say housing authorities, doesn't say enterprises. And then can we use our own area median income for qualification instead of, you know, again, Minneapolis or Duluth. And then finally, EPA, again, some key. And how do we ensure tribal communities are included? They don't say, it says tribes are eligible. It says disadvantaged communities. There's a definition of that. Doesn't explicitly include tribes. So how do we make sure that when the EPA is doing both the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, the Climate Pollution Reduction Fund, and the Climate Justice Block Grants, that, you know, while tribes are eligible to apply for grants, compete for the grants, we're not necessarily included in the definition of disadvantaged communities. So how do we make sure we're included in all that? Okay, so that's it for me. So get ready to comment. I don't know if anybody out of the Mterra footprint is on the tribal Treasury Tribal Tax Advisory Committee, but we should be promoting tribal consultation through them, and just be prepared to comment. All right.
Say Pilar.
Perfect.
Real
Yes.
quick, Brandy had a question for the funding that you reviewed earlier. I think she asked this during the EPA items. Can any of this funding be used to build capacity to implement these programs?
Yeah, so the climate pollution is a planning and implementation grant. That's capacity building, and same with this Justice Block Grant. On the greenhouse gas emission, there is some capacity building in here, right? Financial and technical assistance for the $7 billion.
Could it fund direct staff positions within the tribe? Is that your understanding?
I don't know. I don't
Okay.
know. We have to see what EPA puts out. What does the term technical assistance mean?
Okay, thank you.
And can you send that letter you mentioned, Pilar, and do you know when that is due?
I don't, EPA has not opened the GHG for comment yet, but the letter that went out last week, kind of a preemptory letter. So I can send you that, letter that went out so you can see. And again, they explicitly wanted to ensure disadvantaged tribal low-income communities are getting the bulk of this support.
And is this, so I saw this is kind of on your agenda for the tulip call, right? I mean, some of this commenting stuff.
Yep.
Okay. And so everyone should have that meeting invite next Monday. And I think we should really get into the weeds on some of this commenting strategy.
Yeah, I'll probably have a draft comment letter just kind of staked out by then as well. And then we can just start to fill it in. And I think the goal is, you know, kind of Tulip develops this model comment letter, and then everybody who's in Tulip just sends it to their respective tribes. So we have multiple tribes. You know, obviously it's not gonna be the same for everybody, but you know, we want to have kind of a core comment that everybody starts to just get into Treasury.
Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
again, I apologize. Any other final questions or comments for me?
It's a lot to digest, but
I
it's
know.
always helpful. And I feel like we make progress each time.
Yeah.
It's just so much.
Thanks,
So
Dr.
J-
Glick. And so we'll get this, we'll have this recording, but will we get this PowerPoint too, Pilar?
Yes, Yeah,
Okay,
I'm gonna
all
send, by the end of the day today, I'll send you this PowerPoint, plus my update on kind of just the energy programs writ large.
Okay,
That
All
I
right, well-
put together monthly.
we know you